Okay. The next item on the agenda, we could go ahead and talk about the military dependents, but Mr. Boone, let's go ahead and do yours, and then we'll move on down the list until we'll move on down the list until we run out of time.
And I hope it's not long. First of all, the way it's presented here doesn't seem like the right wording, and that may be exactly what I told Mrs. West, though. The fact that it says invocation and board decorum, but it's really about decorum regarding the invocation that we have at our monthly meeting and the difficulty we've had for the past few months regarding an individual who decides to speak and or perform. It has come to my attention that perhaps those antics need not even happen. My attention that perhaps those antics need not even happen, because when I look at this, the speaker forum, it regards public forum. It says that the board will allow public comment on any matter of relevance to public education. And this particular speaker is choosing to be disruptive in a lot of different ways. We, for all the years that I've been on the school board, have had the opportunity to invite someone to give an invocation. And all that's in question now regarding this individual who speaks to us. I think that he's disruptive in the fact that he gets to do what he wants to do while the person who has been invited to give the invocation is doing so. Last month in particular, I could hear two people talking. One of them was chant, and one of them was a person giving the invocation at the podium. To me, that's not called for, nope. And that he is out of order in doing what he does. Secondly, anybody could walk up to that podium and say, well, I just think I'm going to choose to talk about anything that I want to tonight, when it says clearly something that's relevant to education, an item that's relevant to public education in Escambia County. That does not mean that he can use part of his 3 minutes to do what he called praying, which is actually a performance. So I thought he was way out of line. I was sorely disappointed when he referred to the guest speaker as a token Jew. And I just hope that we can come to some kind of conclusion or policy that's going to determine that everything that this speaker's doing is really and truly out of line. It's not relevant to, I mean, if he wants to speak about the policies that we have, that's an item that's relevant to education in Escambia County. But to take it further than that and do what he darn well pleases at the podium is wrong. It doesn't say that he can do that, and I think he's been out of line every time. What are we going to do about it? This month is my decision to invite somebody to give the invocation. I have no intention of compromising what I believe and what I've done for 8 years because of the whims of one person that we would rather just go away. I don't care if he's here at every meeting until he's as white-headed as I am. I don't plan to compromise.
Mr. Prakash?
Well, obviously, I brought the same item, Mr. Boone, so we're tracking on the same issue, so we can knock two of these off at once. Further down, I have a discussion maintaining decorum during school board meetings. We'll just put the check right there, if you don't mind me teaming up with you, sure. Mr. Boone. But I just want to just say some brief things about what happened last month. It was infuriating to me. It was extremely disrespectful. It was an attack. It was an attack on a board member that was tolerated. And it was an attack, more importantly, on my invited guest. Here's the thing. We've been beat up by this one person. We've been nice. He puts his prayer rug out here. And first he started turning his back on people. Okay, that's fine. You're not. But then he's taking it a step further, and he's just pushing and pushing. Now he's got a prayer rug out here. He's chanting so loud that even James Nibbs is coming up saying, I can't hear. I mean, and all the while, our speaker is up here trying to deliver an invocation. And, there are several people that have reached out to me to bring the invocation. And I like Mr. Boone, I believe that it's a privilege that we're entitled to bring someone that represents our views to come bring the invocation. But in a sense of just trying to be somewhat accommodating, I chose someone who does not share my religious faith. And that still wasn't good enough. And he was insulted with a vicious anti-Semitic slur, and it was permitted to happen, and I'm not happy with it. So, Mr. Boone, I agree with you. We've got to find a way to rein this person in. I understand people have a freedom of speech. They have the freedom of expression. But when you cross the line and you're disrupting a meeting and you're insulting invited guests, it must be shut down. It must be shut down. You know, otherwise I'm not going to be inclined to bring someone because I don't want to be embarrassed like I was that night. That's how I feel about it.
Ms. Moultrie?
I would like to hear the opinion of our attorney regarding this issue. What are our options?
This is a very difficult issue, obviously. There are two clauses in the Constitution that deal with religion. One is the free exercise clause, that Congress and thence the states will not make any law that abridges free exercise of religion. The other clause in the Constitution is that there will be no establishment of a religion by the government. What you have in a number of areas in public life now is the conflict between those two. Does a government official sitting in his or her capacity as a government official retain their free exercise rights? At what point does their free exercise become the establishment of a state religion? You know, government can't pick a religion, but people involved in government have the right to freely exercise their religion. The Galloway case that kind of brought all this to a head stated that deliberative bodies, legislative bodies, and in my opinion, this board is one of those. You have the ability to set taxes. That is inherently a legislative function. Some of the cases that involve school boards involve those ceremonial boards that they have in other states where students are honorary members, things like that. You are a legislative body. When you, as a legislative body, convene, the Galloway case has said that it is acceptable to have prayer. There is some support for the position that prayer, by definition, is theist or deist, that it assumes that there's someone on the other end of the communication. A humanist prayer is an oxymoron. It's a tin can and a string with nobody at the other end. That said, I believe you have the right to have an invocation at the meetings of the school board. The Galloway decision does not tell us a whole lot about how that looks when we put it into practice. In order to try to maintain as much control over things, not wanting to confront or deny anyone their rights, it's been my position that if a person wants to come forward at public forum and the issue that they're talking about is this board's establishment or not of a religion, that does relate to public education. It's what the school board is doing. Is the school board running the risk of spending money on litigation? So I, at one point, stated that Mr. Suhor was privileged to say whatever he wished to for 3 minutes at public forum. The problem with the chanting, the disrupting others, is very problematic. If it rises to the level that it is disrupting the meeting, then I think the chair has the right to ask that it cease. I think that if that is done, it will escalate. I don't think that that the chair's polite request to desist will be met with cooperation. Can't predict the future, but that would be my guess. Out of all of this, I have done a lot of research, a lot of talking, a lot of trying to figure out the best way just to resolve it. Speaking as your attorney, strictly looking at it from a risk management viewpoint, which is my professional view, you need to go to a moment of silence, because that would not incur any chance of spending money on litigation. As your legal advisor, I have to tell you, that's my professional opinion. On the other hand, I'm a person of faith as well. I can say that, if a person praying from a Christian viewpoint that doesn't parallel mine, I'd rather hear a moment of silence. But the Galloway decision, to sum it all up, says that a legislative body can have a prayer. And if this board wants to continue that practice, you have the right to do so, and I'll defend you if it ends up going in court. As far as the disruption during other speakers, that becomes a matter of judgment. How bad is the disruption? Is it bad enough that we want to take the risk of it escalating, possibly criminal charges being filed, playing into a circus atmosphere? And so it's a very difficult question when you have two diametrically opposed constitutional philosophies, and they're both in the United States Constitution.
That sure clears it up. Thank you.
Might I address the board?
If I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mrs. Waters, for your opinion on that matter, and I appreciate hearing it. I am of the opinion that I am not ready to sacrifice giving up what we have as a board under the pressure of the party that's pushing this forward. So I am willing to continue until someone says we have to do a moment of silence.
I concur.
I do too.
There's three.
There's three. I do want to address the board, since I was named in blogs and in newspaper accounts as not having control of the last month's meeting, to kind of share with you my thought process at that time. The gentleman is not here today. Comes to our meetings, and I think one of the reasons he continues to come is because one of our board members has given him fodder to take us to court. When the first emails came to all of us asking if he would be allowed to do the invocation, there was a response that could get us in trouble. Every month, and I'm sure Ms. Moultrie did the same thing when she was chair, you have to weigh, is the disruption going to be greater by calling attention to it than it is to put him out of the room? Melody does a wonderful job. He is never in the videos, except when he gets to the public forum part. I believed last month when he just put on there that he was going to talk about the invocation, that he was still just going to do what he normally does and talk to us about, I prefer it's a moment of silence. He went into his chant at that point. I, too, had a conversation with Rabbi Fleetop, and he was very gracious. He said he walked out of the room with the gentleman. They had a wonderful conversation. Because as a man of the Jewish faith, he too struggles when we as Christians pray. And he encouraged me to continue the separation of church and state. Now, I just heard 3 people, so I know that may not be where we're going. So in the last few weeks, I've been doing some research, trying to figure out which school boards in the state of Florida have invocations. I haven't gotten through all 67 counties yet, and it's pretty evenly divided with the ones I've gone to. Some it's hard to determine without actually reading the minutes, which I haven't done, as to whether they have just an opening thought for the day, because sometimes it just says opening. But one of the things that in my conversations with Ms. Waters, we have thought might be one of the first steps is that we will call the meeting to order at the beginning. We have, in our past practice has been to have the invocation, the pledge, the public forum, and then call the meeting to order. We will call the meeting to order and then do the opening and the pledge and the public forum, because realistically the public forum should be part of our meeting. I've also found some words that might be helpful that I intend to include in the opening. I'll have to change them a little bit, but it will happen actually before I call the meeting to order, which will say something along the lines of shortly before the opening gavel that officially begins a school board meeting, a member of this board will introduce the invocation speaker. No person in attendance is or shall be required to participate in this observation, and the personal decision of each person regarding participation will have no impact on his or her right to actively participate in the school board's business meeting. That gets to the point that we are not requiring anyone in the room to participate in whatever the invocation is. By calling the meeting to order, if there's a disruption, they can be called for being disruptive. They can be called out of order. But I, like Ms. Waters, don't believe that will change anything at this point. And I have had conversations with my minister and lots of people who I appreciate their thought processes about this and whether I'm not doing my due diligence, but I'm kind of the opinion that if we go to a moment of silence, we had a number of students in the room last month. We asked for a moment of silence at our schools, so we are not offending anyone. And it also takes the podium away from him.
I ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It was of my opinion, since this all started under my watch, that if we call the meeting to order and then do the invocation, that was the drawing line between separation of religion and state. But we have
That's an argument that can be made in doing research. You know, I hadn't really thought about it until all of this came up. I did some research. I don't really find that the distinction of before we call it to order or after we call it to order is really that persuasive. I don't think that a judge is going to say, oh, as long as you do it before you call the meeting to order, it's not being sponsored by the school board. If that were so, then at every graduation, we would be able to say, okay, we're all here, everybody in place, we're going to have a prayer, and then we'll start the graduation. Courts don't look at it that way. If it is during the assembly, if it is being led by the elected officials, then I don't think a technical, well, we really hadn't called the meeting to order is going to save us. That's a judgment call. We can argue it in court, but I just don't find it to be persuasive in light of the case law.
Ms. Waters and I have had that conversation since he started showing up, basically, because I had been at meetings where, and I will say that, as I recall, from the 40 school districts that I've looked at, the ones that do have an invocation, about half and half, call the meeting to order, then do it. Others have it first. But what I've asked her to give a legal opinion on is, can we hang our hat on the fact that we are a legislative body? That is what gives us the right to have the invocation, is what my understanding is, and I think that is what you have said to me.
Okay, yes. I think much more than the "we haven't yet called it to order" argument. The argument is that this is a legislative body, that you, under Galloway, under a long string of cases, Congress has a chaplain on payroll. The Florida legislature, when I worked there, began every session with a prayer. And students are present in Congress and the legislature as student pages and visitors, people being honored. It's clear under the Constitution that a legislative body can pray. The purpose, according to the Galloway decision, is it is not for the audience. They don't have to participate. They may not participate. It is to focus the minds of the board members, to bring attention to the fact that you're following a higher purpose, whatever your beliefs are. Therefore, I think, given that language in the Galloway decision, there's some authority for the fact that if none of the board members are of that persuasion, do they really have to invite it? That when an atheist or Wiccan or Muslim or whatever is on the school board, then it will be appropriate to include that in the rotation. That's an argument that can be made. But I think the best thing we do at this point is that you are a legislative body. I will tell you there is no clear case law on that, though. As the individual has noted, there are a couple of federal courts that have looked at it and have concluded that school boards were not legislative bodies. My research has shown that those were school boards that did not levy taxes, did not impose policy, did not make, you essentially make a statute that governs the schools in Escambia County every time you pass a school board rule. It is a form of statutory law. So I can't promise you that a court will find that you are a legislative body. I think that the argument is strong enough that, as I always tell Mr. Burgash, I can make that argument with a straight face. I believe in that argument. And therefore, if we decide to go to court, I will argue that we are, in fact, or you are, a legislative body, that you have the right to pray, that that prayer is intended for your benefit, not the benefit of anyone in the audience. And further, the Galloway decision does not require that when someone makes a bad faith request with the stated intention of being disruptive, that you have to honor that.
That's right.
Okay. Now, I would like to add one thing, if I might, Madam Chair. However, we are embarking on a path that may result in litigation. Everyone at this table, I know all of you, you all have beliefs that you hold deeply. I have beliefs I hold deeply. Nevertheless, as your attorney, it is my professional obligation to tell you, all my beliefs aside, this is the best thing for you legally. I am not asking anyone to compromise their beliefs. I'm not asking anyone to say anything or do anything they don't believe in. But when you make statements, weigh carefully the need for a statement against your fiduciary duty not to give ammunition to someone that can be used to make this board liable in a lawsuit. If you make statements, you have to operate with the school board's best interest at heart, their fiduciary best interest. And if you choose not to do that, that has to be a conscious decision based upon your beliefs and your conscience, and you know and accept what it is you're doing. Because if someone If a board member now said something completely off the wall, egregious, that could be used to prove that we've violated someone's rights, in court, I will have to argue that that board member was not speaking as a board member, that board member was incurring possibly personal liability. So the less said, the better when you're getting into the world of litigation.
Thank you, Ms.
And with
Waters.
that said,
Mr. Bergosh?
I'd like to correct the record. Well, first of all, I want to say, Patty, thank you for bringing some ideas that might help the meetings run a little smoother. I appreciate that. But I do want to correct something that you said. I know it was directed to me. I did not return his email. His first contact to me, just as it was to all the board members, was a phone call. And I called Ms. West specifically, and we had a talk about it. And I said, who is this David Suhor? And so my first contact with that gentleman was a phone call. And then right after that phone call, he took to his blog with his version of what that phone call was, which he put into an email which did not reflect the reality of our conversation. He mischaracterized what I said. He lied about what I said. So please don't say it's an email I sent. I didn't send an email. We had a conversation. He memorialized what he thought,
If I'm
what he
requested,
wanted
I
it to
will
say.
turn it over.
Well, go ahead.
I mean, I have to.
You can.
I'm just saying.
I'm not hiding anything. But what I'm saying is, I'm not going to let you sit here and say that I wrote an email that put us on the hook, because I didn't. We had a phone conversation, and he put something into an email, which I have, from that day forward, denied ever happened, because it didn't, the way he said it. Just wanted to make sure I cleared that up.
Okay, while we're clearing up things, he did not attack you by name. On our forms, it says you address the board and the superintendent by title, and he only used your title.
Yeah, but he made an ad hominem attack, and you know that he did, and you didn't stop it. But that's okay. I wouldn't have let him do it to you when I was chairman. Just keep that in mind.
Boone?
Last question. So in the event that he continues to show up at the meetings and or workshops, but at the meeting, is he within his right to, while he has 3 minutes on the clock, to say what he wants to say and then do his thing?
I will be prepared. If he moves to start an invocation, I will cut him off at that point. I do believe, I went home and I read up again, and I think that I could have cut him off then. I think his preliminary statements, I wouldn't have been able to stop those because he does have the right. But once he said, I am now going to, I could have stopped him there. I will say I apologize that I did not stop him there, but I was kind of, okay, he's only got a minute left. Mr. Slayton.
That's it. Leave it to the Southern Baptist to go last, right? I've been weighing this one very seriously myself. And I don't want to do anything. First of all, I don't want to do anything to bring someone here to do an invocation and then be embarrassed, that person. Secondly, I am concerned about the students that we have in the audience, the influence and the notoriety that this person, I think, is trying to build for themselves. I do not want to do anything that would cause litigation, that litigation might not, in the case we're talking about, stop us, but give him the promotional right to do it, that we have to let this happen. Now, I don't know if that's possible, but I think that would be something that the person would try. So, where I am, I'm just like every Sunday morning. The more prayer, the better. Just like all in my life, the more prayer, the better. But I don't believe, as I was once asked, at a political gathering that you and I were at. I said, the person said, we have stopped prayer in school. And I said, as long as there are tests in school, there will be prayer. As long as we're at this board meeting, and I feel confident the people that are on this board and the superintendent, if they need to, we pray. We pray to ourselves. I don't want to give this person a theater. I don't want to give this person the ability to drag us through the mud. That's what I'm having to promote. And that's difficult to understand, and I sure can't understand it in the legal aspects of what could go on, because I never thought what's going on today would ever happen in my lifetime through legal courts. So I want to support what I think is best in the interests of this board and this county and the students of this county. So I don't have the definitive answer. I like what you've come up with, and I will be sitting there beside you, rooting you on.
Thank you, Mr. Slayton. Are there any other comments? Anybody over here? We are at 5:20. Do we want to plow on, or do people